Hey guys, Fox here, and with less than 20 days to the USFL's second season, it is finally time to do my first 2023 USFL season power rankings. So yes, these are the Week 1 power rankings, where I rank all these teams heading into Week 1. Now, naturally, there could be still some more shakeups. Kyle Sloter recently being released to the XFL. Nobody knows if he's going to sign with another XFL team or come back to the USFL. Naturally, we don't know if any other drafted players are going to come to the league. This is based on the day this is being posted on March 29th. These are my rankings based on essentially their coaching, their players, where they're playing, all that kind of stuff. So without further ado, let's get started. Coming in at 8th place is going to be one that might shock you in the Houston Gamblers. Yes, I have the Gamblers as the worst team, and though it might shock some people mainly because I don't have a certain other team at last, I think that if you followed the USFL in this offseason, this is very obvious. This team had the biggest loss of overall talent. Not only did they lose their head coach in Kevin Sumlin, who was a very solid coach, and a DC and Tim Lewis, but the amount of players they lost that were legitimately great players is insane. They lost their starting quarterback in Clayton Thorson, they lost their touchdown guy in Isaiah Zuber, and they lost basically their whole defense. The guy who I thought was the best player in the entire league last year, Chris Odom, is gone. Their two great linebackers in Reggie Northrup and Donald Payne are both gone. Their outstanding corners and Micah Abernathy and Will Likely are both gone. This is really bad. They lost a lot of all-USFL talents. They lost 3 guys who were on the all-USFL team, while also losing a lot of other solid players. And the additions are where the problem lie. You added Curtis Johnson as your head coach. That's a massive downgrade. You added Eric Price as an OC, and he's not the best. Chris Wilson as a DC, I think, is a really solid defensive coordinator. But Eric Price is your primary OC now, which they didn't have last year. Not great. Then running back TJ Pledger, he should be decent. It's just Mark Thompson is back, which is like the only good thing. Then there are other, decent additions are like Joshua Moore, Tim Bonner, Eli Howard, and Isaiah Pryor. But none of these guys have that sort of credential or past to make you think they're going to make up for what the team lost. The team lost a lot of quality players, and the fact is that these are not big enough upgrades. And then when you look at it in terms of the easiest way to look at a team is through just the head coach and quarterback, where in terms of head coach, they have the worst in the league. I think it's very obvious that Curtis is the worst in the league. He basically has the same credentials Kirby did, except that Johnson was a head coach, though he was pretty bad as a head coach, but he's at least been one. So he's definitely better than Kirby Wilson from the Maulers last year, but he's still not that great. And then their quarterback room, I have him at 7th. I have one team worse than them. And the only reason I have him this high is because Terry Wilson and Kenji Bahar were on the team last year, and Kenji did have some legit playing time and is probably going to be the primary starting quarterback. We don't know for sure. And they got Montel Cozart, who was a practice squad guy for the Stallions last year. I think that overall, when you look at this team, the Gamblers, they're very obviously the worst team in the league. They have the least amount of great talent, and the fact is they lost a lot of pieces without really upgrading or replacing, and especially in the head coaching department, they really took some massive downgrades. Coming in at number 7 is the team that you probably expected to be 8 in the Pittsburgh Maulers. This team definitely did upgrade a lot, but they didn't really upgrade enough to make me say, oh yeah, this team, is clearly the best in the league or something like that. I think they upgraded to the point where they were able to be better than a team that downgraded a ton in the Gamblers. So in terms of this team, in their biggest losses, they lost their head coach, which is really a gain in Kirby Wilson, but they did lose Vadley, who was a very solid quarterback. They lost Vadal Alexander, who was a decent lineman. And they did lose a decent amount of players on defense. They lost a couple corners in Terrell Bonds and Shakur Brown. Carlo Kemp was a solid defensive end. He's gone. And they did lose a very solid overall special teams unit. Ramis Ahmed, Max Duffy, and Mitch Fabroni were a very solid trio and were one of the best trios in the league, all things considered. So they did lose a huge part of their special teams. But in terms of why I have them above, for one, they do kind of have a home stadium. They're in what the USFL is calling Greater Pittsburgh in Canton, Ohio, so we'll see how true that is. They got Ray Horton, who I don't think is a great head coach in this league, but it's definitely a massive upgrade over Kirby Wilson. I think that James Morgan isn't as good as Vadley, but is still a solid guy. There's a reason he was a 4th-round pick in the NFL, so definitely a solid pick. Chase Forcade, Traycon Dorsey is a huge addition, though. This is the guy from their draft that actually came to the league this year, within just literally a couple weeks from the draft, it feels like. So that should be a very solid addition to the offensive line immediately and make up for Vadal Alexander leaving and more. Then Terry Beckner and it was a decent one. And then they got a decent punter and kicker in Nathan Harley and Matt Mangle. Especially Mangle should be pretty decent. But the big addition is Reuben Foster, a former first-round pick who isn't in the NFL because of off-the-field problems and I believe an ACL tear. But Reuben should be a huge impact on this team's defense. The fact is the defense didn't lose it didn't lose the most important. It didn't lose Bryce Tornerton, who was their all-USFL safety. That's a huge deal that he's still here. So the team should still be very solid on defense. It had a couple of games where it looked pretty good. But, yeah, Reuben Foster should definitely be a huge addition. Now, in terms of where their quarterback room and head coach rank, it's basically the opposite of the Gamblers. They got the second to worst head coach in Ray Horton, who, like I said, is a huge upgrade over Kirby, which isn't, saying much. But the QB room has the worst in the league. They got a total of 4 quarterbacks on the team right now, but none of them are guys from last year because it looked for a while they were going to keep rolling Rivers, but then once Kirby was gone, he went with him. So the team didn't keep any of their 4 quarterbacks from last year and have a completely different room now, which maybe it works out. I mean, it's not like I look at anyone besides Morgan and say that's a, legit starting quarterback, and that's why I have him this low. They don't have anyone coming for a second season, and their best option isn't one that is amazing, just really solid on James Morgan. Coming in at number 6 is the first potential hot take, is the New Orleans Breakers being all the way down here at 6. Yes, the Breakers made the playoffs last year, were a solid team. I have them dropping 2 spots from the end of last year to being the 6th team in the league, and basically saying that they won't make the playoffs this year. Why? Well, as you can see by the font being a lot less, you can clearly tell this team lost a lot of players. And this isn't even really me reaching. These are all players who were solid contributors to the team. Head coach Larry Fedora, their OC Noel Malzone. They lost Kyle Sloter, the quarterback that, while yes was an all-USL quarterback, I've said wasn't really awesome. And I still don't believe he's all that great. He's solid, but it's still a big loss. You lost your other quarterback who could have been your quarterback for this year in Shea Patterson, who was the number 1 overall pick in the QB round last year. You lost the USFL rushing leader in Jordan Ellis. You lost one of your solid receivers in Taywan Taylor. You lost your awesome tight end Sal Cannella. You lost your awesome edge rusher in Davin Bellamy. You lost 2 great linebackers in Christian Sam and Gerard Fernandez. You lost a really solid corner in Ike Brown and a really solid kicker in Taylor Bertollet. You lost all those guys. So, I have them at 6. Well, why didn't I drop them anymore if they lost so much compared to, let's say they're the only team that competes with the Gamblers for lost talent? The upgrades. John DeFilippo, I think, is a lateral, if not upgrade, to Larry Fedora. I think Doug Martin as OC is decent. This is not Doug Martin, the running back. This is the other Doug Martin. I mean, he was a head coach for a while, so I think this is definitely a solid one to get as an OC. But the reason is because their quarterback room, I think, is already probably an upgrade, if not very close to being an upgrade. Akil Glass and McLeod Bethel Thompson are both guys who can definitely be starting quarterbacks in this league. Akil Glass basically named something you can win in the historically black college university circuit, I guess we'll call it. He basically won it. He was a first team all SWAC twice. He was second team twice. He was an offensive player of the year twice in his last 2 years that he was there. He was outstanding. He won 2 Deacon Jones trophies, which is for the most outstanding all-around American football player in historically black colleges and universities. To put it simply, this guy is really great. And the only reason I wouldn't say he's guaranteed to be the starter is because he has the guy who literally last year was the CFL passing leader and was an all-star last year, and was a Grey Cup champion as the team starting quarterback in McLeod Bethel Thompson. This team's got 2 really, really good quarterbacks, which I think might be upgrades. Then Wes Hills is a solid addition at running back. They got a couple decent wide receivers. Sage Surratt showed some promise with the Stallions at the end of last year, and they got Jordan Brailford, Jordan Brailford being your best addition on defense, as he was a 7th-round pick by the Redskins in 2019. I believe that was the last year they were the Redskins. You can see why this team's at 6. While I love their quarterback moves, once you get past it, they didn't really do enough. Surratt is decent, but he's no Cannella. They didn't really get that much back on defense. So, I think that this team had a lot to be desired on who they added and lost, and that shows in their coach and QB room rank. Saying they have the 4th best head coach and the 5th best QB room should say that this team's much higher than it is, but it's just that I don't like the rest of the team. I think DiFilippo definitely is the fourth best coach in the league. I think he's going to be really solid. I think he's going to be a really great coach. And then I think when you look at their QB room, the only reason I have them this low is literally because they haven't played in the USFL. And I'd rather have teams that have talent that's been here with their team getting a second year, or the fact that there is one QB that was probably better than either of these guys that was added this season. So their QB room and head coach rank, while they're better than their rank is overall, they have such a massive downgrade on defense and the rest of their offense. I think there's a reason for them to struggle, so I'm putting them at 6. Coming in at number 5 is going to be the Memphis Showboats. The team that was the Bandits last year and now the Showboats, I have at 5. Now, this might be somewhat of a shock that I have them over the Breakers, since, the Breakers, famously beat the Bandits in Week 9 to make the playoffs, essentially. Or they did. But I think that the Showboats have done enough upgrading to where they deserve to be this high. Now, in terms of their losses, they did lose a very solid DC in Pepper Johnson. They lost their quarterback, who was a top 5-ish quarterback, in Jordan Teamu. They lost, for whatever it's worth, B.J. Emmons and Juwan Washington, two somewhat underwhelming running backs. They lost what is arguably the best tight end in the league that just nobody talked about in Cheyenne O'Grady. They basically lost their entire O-line, though they didn't lose Jerron Jones, who was their best offensive lineman and an all-USFL player. He's still here. They lost a couple solid defensive players, Quentin Meeks, Travis Freeney, and Michael Scott. No, not the Michael Scott from The Office. But I have them this high because, well, they got a lot of really solid other players, is the best way to put it. And I think that's pretty easy to say once you look at it. First of all, yes, they do have a home stadium. This is a huge deal. They finally have a home stadium. Having a legit home stadium is always a huge deal because you get fans in the stadium and all that to help cheer your team, which is a very solid thing. Their DC, they promoted Carnell Lake, that's why I don't have a new notable addition. So not only do they have their home stadium for fans to come in and give them a home field advantage the Stallions had, they have some really solid upgrades. Now, they still have Brady White, who is presumably going to be the starter, but they got a very solid backup option in Cole Kelly. This is a guy who was a Walter Payton Award winner, an FCS first-team All-American twice, a guy who's won a couple awards, a very solid player, all things considered. Definitely someone you look at as a very solid addition. And they got some other solid ones as well. I mean, they've got a lot of players that helped Alex Collins as a running back, John Vea Johnson, Daniel Helm, overhauling that offensive line that was really bad outside of Jones. So the offensive line should be a lot better. Big Cat Bryant should be a great haul on defense, and then Nate Hall and Josh Nurse are also very solid on defense. So all things considered, this team had a decent amount of upgrades to the team. Now, none of them are, insane, as once you get past really their QB that they got and Josh Nurse, because Nurse was, pretty solid. The guy played a couple games in the NFL. It's not like this team is insane. It's just that I think that the fact they have a home field advantage and the fact that they've gotten a better quarterback group, because, not better quarterback group, but they've got a solid quarterback group that's close to the Breakers, and the fact that they're bringing back a lot of the same team. As the big question was, could they bring back their receivers? And they did. Rashard Davis and Derek Dillon, who are both very solid, are both back. So their receiving core, they really only lost O'Grady. Their running back group wasn't the best, so overhauling it was good. They overhauled their O-line. They overhauled the positions that they need to. It's just hoping that now their defense can once again be better. And in terms of the ranking of their quarterback and head coach, I have them both at 6. I think Haley could have a decent year. I don't think he did enough last year to show that he should be above DiFilippo, the big three, and the other new addition, Mike Nolan. And I think that their quarterback room is just barely below the Breakers. And the reason I have them just below them is really because I think that the ceiling for Bethel Thompson and Akil Glass are higher than really anyone on this group. But I think that both Brady White and Cole Kelly can be very solid quarterbacks for this team. So that's kind of where my whole thought process was. But yeah, we'll see for sure how that works, but I have the Showboats at 5. Coming in at number 4 is the Michigan Panthers. This team is definitely the biggest change from my last power rankings. The final power rankings, I had them at 7, and now I have them all the way at 4. So, now, some of you may be saying, oh, you're just saying that because you like the Panthers or something like that. No, it's very obvious why the Panthers should be this high. They upgraded the most, by a mile. In terms of their losses, they lost a lot of guys that you look at and say aren't the biggest of deals. Now, Cam Scarlett and Lance Lenore are both huge losses. I'm not going to go against that. Well, Cam Scarlett's a decent loss, but Lenore's huge. But Jeff Fisher, he proved to not be that great. Daniel Carroll's a DC. It's fine. Paxton Lynch, though he had a great last game, a lot of people aren't a fan of him, so it's not a big deal they lose him. Then Jaquan Bailey, TJ Carter, Kayvon Walker, and Tino Ellis are all solid defenders that weren't top tier, but were all very solid, and that does hurt to lose. But the additions are where this team shines. They get a home stadium just like the Showboats did, so now the Panthers should have a home field advantage that's going to be really helpful for them. Mike Nolan as the head coach, I do think is going to be an upgrade over Jeff Fisher. Mike Nolan was a very solid coach, all things considered, in a lot of the ways he's gone. He had a couple bad years at the end, but really he's a solid addition that should help this defense get a lot better, along with Steve Brown. And here's the reason why this team moves up so high. These additions are really big. Lano Hill and Garrett Marino are like the two least important ones, and even that's really not even fully true because, I mean, like, let's put it this way, okay? Like, Lano Hill was a former third-round pick. Trey Quinn is a receiver that was a seventh-round pick but has over 250 yards in the NFL and some return yards. So this team did get some really solid players overall. So they look to be pretty good, right? And then you've got Garrett Marino, who's a very controversial guy in the CFL, who should be a good upgrade if he does, fully commit to this team and stuff. But then the big additions, because you've got a few really big ones. The big additions you've got Breeland Speaks, who was a former second-round pick in the NFL just a few years ago in 2018. You have a former first-round pick in Robert Kimdichie, who was a former first-round pick back in 2016. But if he's still got stuff left in him, he can be really solid for this team. And when I mentioned about the one, bigger quarterback that has better ceiling, Carson Strong. Carson Strong is a guy who could have been a first-round pick and probably would have been, but he had very big concerns on his knees, and that's why he ended up not getting drafted. He, didn't get the best of looks in the offseason. There's a legit shot he could dominate the league and become the best quarterback in spring football and turn that right into being a legit quarterback that might compete for a job in the NFL. That's the kind of potential he's got there. So you look at these additions and you realize why this is such a big upgrade for the team. They got a lot of really solid players. And then we go on to the head coach and QB room rank, and this is also why they're a bit higher than the Breakers as well. I mean, they're basically the same, kind of just reverse. So, you got 5 in head coach and Mike Nolan, and you got 4 in the QB room. It's just like this QB room, the top 4 QB rooms are all very close. Well, mainly 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 are, and they're just all much better than everyone else. Because Josh Love and Eric Berry were both here last year, and they're going to get a full offseason, which neither of them really got. So they should be able to, get to this offensive group better, because the offensive group is basically the same group running this team. So on offense, they should still be completely fine in terms of what they were doing, but now just have, better players to do it for the most part. And then Carson Strong could be an awesome quarterback if he, actually pans out. I think those reasons are enough to put this team up at 4, because you got a home field advantage and you got a really solid upgrade at quarterback, all things considered. It's just the big question is, can Trey Quinn do enough to offset the Lance Lenoir loss? Because they brought back a lot of great players. The players that really mattered, the Reggie Corbin, Stevie Scott, the Frank Gidna, they're back. It's just that this defense should be a massive upgrade, and so should the quarterback position, which should be enough to propel this team to being a playoff team. Coming in at number 3 is going to be the New Jersey Generals. This team stays the same from where they were at the end of last year at 3. Though I will say, I was very close to actually knocking this team down to 4 and the Panthers up, but I ended up not doing it. Now, the big losses are big. They're really huge. Chris Dishman, a very solid DC, he's gone. Luis Perez, one of their 2 tandem quarterbacks, he's gone. Cavante Turpin, the MVP of the league last year, he's gone naturally. Darius Shepard, who was a very underrated receiver on this team, he's gone. Jamon Moore, who brought talent, though not as much production as you'd hope, he's gone. All USFL tackle Garrett McGinn, he's gone. Then they lost a really solid corner, Devontae Bosby, and they lost a couple other decent players in Destiny Vallejo and Caden Novikov. So there's a lot of losses on this team, and the additions aren't the best. Ted Cottrell as your DC is decent, and then Isaiah Battle and DeMornay Pearson L are both okay, but they're not really going to do enough to replace the guys they lost probably. The real additions, Blake Countess is honestly a pretty decent addition. The guy was a 6th-round pick in the NFL, ended up sticking around in the league till 2021 from 2016, and he has over 50 tackles and is technically a Super Bowl champion, so that's a decent addition to the back end to hope that one might be able to counter Devontae Bosby. Nick Skiba is a really solid kicker. He kicked 2 times for the Steelers last year, and he made both field goals, so He has production in the NFL, so that's decent. And then Dakota Prukop is a quarterback that is in the USFL. To put it simply, he's a decent one. He's not, the high ceiling guy the other guys are, but he was part of the Argonauts team that won the Grey Cup in 2017. The guy has played in the CFL for a few years and has been there. So at least from what I've heard in training camp, there's a good chance that him and DeAndre do the dual quarterback system together that Luis President Johnson did last year. We don't know for sure. Yes, I have this team at 3. And this team, it's really just because of the fact they didn't lose all their top talent. Terry Poole is still here, one of their best offensive linemen, aside from McGinn. Both their Thunder and Lightning running back tandem with Darius Victor and Trey Williams are back. As I said before, DeAndre Johnson's back. Kyle Laletta is still here, who was here at the end of last year. Shalem Luani, who was an all-USFL player, he's still here. So the team, for the most part, has still about half or a third of their top-end talent is still here. And I think they did a couple upgrades. And I think that overall, when you look at their head coach and QB room, I think that 3 for both is fair. DeAndre Johnson is a really solid quarterback. And then Mike Riley's a really solid head coach. Yeah, Riley kind of did botch that playoff game because I know DeAndre might have been a bit hurt, but he should have at least played him in a little bit. And I think this QB room, though, is going to be really solid. Kyle Laletta is someone who maybe with a full offseason could actually, and not Kirby Wilson as your head coach, could do some legit production, as I could see him and Prukop switching during the year, and DeAndre being the primary guy, just with, the other 2 in there as well. I think this team at 3 might be a little bit generous, but I think that all things considered, the fact that coach is so important, the fact that quarterback room is important too, and the fact that they do have the 3rd best in both, I think it's fair to put him here. The Generals come in at 3. Coming in at number 2, and what might be the only other hot take, is I have the Stallions at 2. Yes, the defending champions I don't have as the best team in the league. So before you say, oh my god, I can't believe you, let's just look at the team and what they lost. They lost Tony Brooks-James, who's a very solid running back, though it makes sense that one of the running backs had to fall, and now that Bo Scarborough is going to be here for the full season. They lost a really solid player in Victor Bolden Jr. The guy was an all-US player in 2 different positions, won the MVP in the all-USFL game, or the championship game, I mean. They lost Cyrus Mitchell, who was arguably their best receiver. Sage Trott, as I said, had a couple decent games at the end, and he's gone. Cam Hunt was an all-USFL guard, and he's gone. Then they lost Doug Costa and Tay Hayes are both solid, and the big one is DeMarcus Gates. That's the biggest loss in the team. Now, their additions, I'm not going to go and say these are terrible. Dion Kane, Jay Sternberger, Derwin Gray, Khalil Davis, Joe Jackson, TJ Green, and Nate Hawley. They're not bad additions. In fact, they're really solid. Jay Sternberger was a 3rd-round pick in the NFL back in 2019, has over 100 receiving yards. The dude was a former All-American and first-team All-SEC type player. Dion Kane at receiver was a 6th-round pick and played in the NFL for a few years. So another decent one. And then you've got a couple really solid safeties to pair with JoJo Tillery, who's still here. I mean, TJ Green had over 100 tackles in his NFL career and was a 2nd-round pick in the past. And then Nate Hawley himself, he was in the CFL for a while and was the most outstanding rookie back in 2019. So that's another solid pick. Khalil Davis was a guy who was a 6th-round pick himself. He was a Super Bowl champion and former 3rd-team All-Big Ten. Joe Jackson, that guy was also a guy who had had over 20 tackles in his second half in the NFL and was a 5th-round pick. And then their last one, in Derwin Gray, he was also a really solid pickup, as this is a guy who had played in a few NFL games and was a drafted player in the 7th round. So they got a lot of decent additions. It's just that I don't think their additions are naturally huge. I think that TJ Green and Nate Hawley and JoJo Tillery, those 3 safeties, they're going to be loaded at safety. They're going to be good there. So their back end should still be fine on defense. It's just that the offensive line probably will take a hit. The receiving core will take a hit, even though Sternberger should be an upgrade at tight end to what they had. The problem is you lost Victor Bolden and Osiris Mitchell. Marlon Williams is still here, and he was arguably the de facto number 1 on the team last year. As, Osiris Mitchell and him were both really solid and underrated, but Williams was arguably the best receiver on the team himself. Probably was. So so him being the number 1 is going to be fine. It's just hoping that Dion Kane and the other guys they added is good enough. And then in terms of the head coach and QB room rank, this is where some people might have a big question mark on the QB room, but we'll get to why I have him at 2 as well later. Head coach rank is 2. I think it's fair. I think everyone probably agrees on that. Skip Holtz proved that he was a very solid coach, but the guy above him deserves to be above him. QB room might be controversial, because both Alex Magoo and Jamar could probably start for over 75% of XFL and USFL teams, either of them. I think there's maybe 4 teams across both leagues that they wouldn't start for. And Jalen Morton, he's there. He's a big reason why I don't have their QB room as the best. But I will say, in terms of the two main guys, as long as Jamar and Alex, as long as one of them's healthy, this team should be fine. Alex may not be as good as Jamar, I would say, but I think it's only a minor downgrade. Jamar was excellent when he played last year, and Alex McGill was able to come in and do enough to win the championship game. So I think they're overall very solid, but I only have them at 2. And coming in at number 1 is the Philadelphia Stars. Now, in one of the next videos coming out will be my predictions for the year. Let me just say this. I think this team is going to continue the trend from both the original and new USFL in making it to the title game. I think this team is definitely the best team in the league. In terms of their losses and additions, the fact that it's the smallest is the biggest reason why I have this team so high. The only losses that really are big are Brian Scott, who was awesome for the 2.5 games he played, but now with Case Cookus isn't really a necessity. Maurice Alexander, that's a big one. He was a decent receiver, but an awesome returner. But I don't think the impact of him being gone is going to be as big as some people think. Freedom Akinmoladun is a really decent one, but with how good Adam Rodriguez was last year, I think that he completely overperformed where we thought Freedom was going to do. And then Josh Banderas was a solid linebacker. But aside from really arguably Scott and Alexander, they didn't lose a humongous piece. And their additions are all solid. They got Vadley as another quarterback option, who was the only quarterback that even looked mediocre with the Maulers last year, so he should be really good with an actual good coaching staff. Jordan Scarlett is a running back who, as a Panthers fan, Carolina Panthers fan, not just Michigan, I watched him play it that one year he was there, and he had a couple of he looked pretty decent, mainly in preseason and stuff like that. I think that Jordan Scarlett is one of the guys that should be a decent addition to the team. And then Corey Coleman, when you look at him, he was a former first-round pick receiver. He didn't have a ton of great years. He only had a couple years where he was decent, but I think that, it's not like he was drafted to the best situation. I mean, he was a Cleveland Brown during, the darkest of ages in the mid-2010s. So hopefully he can bounce back his career, and that's definitely what he's probably looking for. And then the other guys they added, Ryan Izzo, this is a guy from the Patriots, tight end. So he brings, that kind of thing. Kelvin Harmon and Ali Fayed are also a couple decent ones. I think that overall, the team may not have done a ton of upgrading, but I think pure receiver-wise, I think Corey is an upgrade over Alexander. I think that getting Ryan Izzo is solid, especially because Bug Howard's right now on the inactive list for some reason. But I think that Jordan Scarlett can add a really solid backup option. Essentially, I don't think they really downgraded at any major position but linebacker. But in terms of the quarterback and head coach rank, and this is why it's number 1, they got the best head coach in the league in Bart Andrus. At this moment, I think it's also fair to say he's the best head coach probably in just XFL or USFL. The guy's been around everywhere, it feels like, in any sort of football, and he's been proving how great he was. That team last year had a ton of injuries during the year, and they still managed to do good enough to make it to the title game and nearly win. And their QB room has the best in the league. Why? They got the best QB in spring football. Carson Strong could definitely overtake this, but right now across the XFL and USFL, ain't nobody arguing Case Cookus is the man. What he did last year was incredible, especially that one game where he had some stupid amount of passing and rushing yards. He's the best quarterback in spring football right now, so that's huge. Then the backups, KJ Costello, though he did kind of sell the title game, he did have that one really solid drive, and the fact is that he's going to get another year in the system. And then, of course, Vadley. You got Vadley, who is, as I said, the only quarterback that really looked decent in that terrible Mahler system. So you're getting a really solid guy there too. And then, Kevin Thompson did play in the CFL. He played in a couple games. So as your 4th string option, I think that he's decent. So the fact is, this team has 3 total quarterbacks that you could legit say that could start for a game, and you would be okay with them starting for a game. With one of them being Case Cookus, who's the best QB in the XFL or USFL, and Vadley, who's a solid option. So I think that when you've got the best QB room, the best head coach, your team didn't really overall downgrade anywhere noticeable but linebacker. I think that it's safe to say this team is the best in the league, and there's a good chance that this team will go on to win the title. Now, I don't know if they're going to go undefeated or anything, because they are playing in that gauntlet that is the North, that, as you've seen in this video, I have as 3 of the 4 best teams in the entire league are in that division. So they might not, come out with this, perfect record or near perfect like the Generals or the Stallions did last year. But for all intents and purposes, they're going to be really solid. They're going to be a great team, and I would say they're definitely going to make it at minimum to the playoffs. but I really do think they got a good shot at winning it. So that'll do it for my Week 1 2023 USFL Power Rankings. Let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are on the rankings and where you would have certain teams. I know there's a couple of hot takes, mainly the Breakers, Panthers, and the Stars can be considered the big hot takes. But I do stand by those decisions. And yeah. Now, naturally, there are things that could change. Brian Scott and Kyle Sloter are the two biggest question marks, as we don't know for sure what's going to happen with them. And if one of them were to go to a team that, isn't the best at quarterback, it could be a huge upgrade. Maybe some more players who are drafted join. Like I said, this is from March 29th, so if anything happens after this day or later when this video is posted, this doesn't really have it, and those will impact the next power ranking videos and my predictions. So make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you notify as every video comes out, since we're about to get to the season where there's going to be more and more content. And as always, have a great night.